A fake HOA cop threatened to tow an elderly woman's walker ramp, the only thing helping her stand on her own. He wore a vest, flashed a clipboard, and bullied seniors like Virginia, thinking no one would push back. But her Army grandson made one powerful call, and the VA rolled in with steel, law, and silence. Just wait till you see how that ramp became untouchable, and how justice landed with full federal weight. Virginia Cole had always been the kind of woman who asked for little and gave much. At 82, she still baked cookies for the neighborhood kids, mailed birthday cards to her old church friends, and insisted on standing to salute the flag during 4th of July parades, even after breaking her hip last winter. That ramp was more than a piece of metal bolted to her porch. It was her lifeline. To the mailbox, the sidewalk, the world beyond her door. So, when she pulled up from her weekly physical therapy appointment and saw the bright orange sticker slapped across it, her breath caught in her throat. The words, written in crude marker beneath a block-printed notice, read, "Non-compliant structure. Towing order pending." She looked around, confused. There was no city vehicle, no inspector, no HOA representative she recognized. Just a plain silver pickup parked across the street. Engine idling, with cheap magnetic decals slapped on the doors. The driver, a man in his early 40s wearing a reflective vest and mirrored sunglasses, was leaning on the hood like he owned the block. Virginia peeled the sticker off with trembling fingers. She clutched it to her chest and shuffled inside, dialing her grandson with hands that shook. "Nate," she whispered into the phone, "someone's trying to take the ramp." 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Nate Cole had driven straight in from Fort Drum on weekend leave. Still in his reserve unit's t-shirt and boots, the 32-year-old mechanic didn't need to ask twice. He spotted the pickup across the street, the smug man leaning there, like he was waiting for applause. Nate crossed the road, calm but firm. "You the one who put that notice on my grandmother's ramp?" The man turned slowly, as if he'd been expecting the confrontation. "Name's Daryl Timmons, compliance officer for Maple Creek HOA. "Funny," Nate replied. "You're not listed on the HOA site." Daryl didn't flinch. He tapped a battered clipboard and pulled a pamphlet from under his arm. "That ramp violates the aesthetic continuity guidelines. Aluminum fixtures weren't approved on structures built prior to 1990. I'm just enforcing the rules." He handed Nate a laminated page that looked like it had been photocopied 20 times. The formatting was off, and the text referred to bylaws that hadn't been in use since the Clinton administration. Nate stared at it, then back at the man. "You planning to remove it?" he asked. "If it's still here Friday," Daryl said with a smile, "it's gone. You can file an appeal, or better yet, build something that doesn't look like it came from a scrapyard." Back on the porch, Virginia stood in the doorway. She hadn't said a word since the sticker came off. Her hands gripped the doorframe not for balance, but for dignity. The color had drained from her face, and her eyes darted between Nate and the man across the street, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a code violation. It was a warning shot, dressed up as paperwork and wrapped in false authority. And for the first time since her injury, Virginia didn't feel safe in her own home. Nate was a patient man by nature. Years in the Army had taught him to measure twice, act once. But something about Daryl Timmons triggered an instinct he couldn't ignore. So he did what any responsible person would do. He called the Maple Creek HOA president directly. The response chilled him. "Daryl who?" the president asked after a pause. "There's no one by that name on the compliance team. In fact, we don't have a compliance team. We outsource inspections, and all notices come through the HOA office, in writing." That was the moment the switch flipped in Nate's head. Daryl wasn't an officer. He wasn't with the HOA. He wasn't enforcing anything but his own invented authority. He was a fraud, and a dangerous one. Fueled by concern, Nate walked door to door down Elm Street and the adjacent cul-de-sac. It didn't take long. Within the hour, 3 elderly residents confirmed that a man in a reflective vest and pickup truck had visited them over the past month, demanding changes to porch furniture, mailbox designs, even flower beds. One woman had paid him $75 in cash to waive a citation. Another said she'd been threatened with eviction if she didn't remove her wind chimes. He wasn't just pretending. He was extorting seniors under the banner of made-up rules. Back at home, Virginia's anxiety was growing by the hour. She stopped opening her blinds. She unplugged the doorbell. And worst of all, she didn't sleep. Not really. Every night she left a porch light on and sat in the living room, watching the ramp from behind the curtain, afraid she'd wake up and find it gone. "You think he'll come back?" she whispered once. Nate's jaw clenched so tightly he could barely speak. "If he does," he finally said, "he won't like how it ends." But Darrell did come back, 2 days later. Only this time, he didn't come alone. At exactly 11:52 a.m. on a Friday morning, a battered white van pulled up behind Darrell's truck. A man in paint-stained overalls stepped out with a tape measure and power tools. Darrell followed, clipboard in hand, as if this were just another day at the office. "You had your warning," he said smugly. "We'll be removing the non-permitted ramp at noon sharp. Of course, if you're interested in a custom consultation, we can delay enforcement." Virginia looked at Nate from the porch, frozen in place, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair like she expected to be dragged down with the ramp. That's when Nate stepped aside, pulled out his phone, and made one call. Just one. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring. "Cole?" "It's time," Nate said. "We've got a problem that needs federal-grade resolution." And with that, everything began to shift. Nate knew better than to waste time on the local police. By the time they finished checking jurisdiction, Virginia's ramp might be gone, and the man behind it long gone too. No, this wasn't a matter for patrol officers. This was personal, and it needed someone with weight. So Nate called someone who owed him a favor, or maybe just someone who respected the uniform as much as he did. Her name was Karen Shields, a senior liaison with the Department of Veterans Affairs Structural Access Team. Years ago, Nate had helped her crew set up mobile units in a forward operating base overseas when their gear was delayed in customs. She remembered. He didn't have to explain twice. "Say no more," Karen said. "We'll handle it." By the following Friday, the neighborhood on Elm Street woke up to something no one expected. Not the neighbors, not Virginia, and certainly not Darrell Timmons. At precisely 11:45 a.m., just 15 minutes before Darrell's so-called removal window, a long black flatbed rolled silently down the street and came to a stop in front of Virginia's home. Emblazoned on the door was the unmistakable seal of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. 2 men stepped out, not in reflective vests, but in government-issued blue, hussars, with steel-toed boots, clipboards, and radios on their belts. No theatrics, no commotion, just practiced coordination. They approached Virginia with quiet deference and a reassuring nod. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we're here to update your access ramp per federal code. You can supervise if you like, or rest inside. We'll be finished shortly." Virginia blinked, stunned, then stood, steadied by her cane, and smiled for the first time in days. The 2 contractors began unbolting the old aluminum ramp with surgical precision. It wasn't torn out. It was respectfully removed. At the same time, the forklift on the flatbed whirred to life, lifting a gleaming new structure, powder-coated steel, weather-resistant, with a wide slope, reinforced side rails, and a small bronze plaque already mounted near the base. It read, "Installed by U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. ADA, Access Certified." Then Darrell pulled up. His truck door slammed shut. He stormed toward the scene, waving his clipboard like a badge. "Hey," he barked, "you can't just— this isn't authorized. This isn't even HOA approved." A tall woman in a gray windbreaker turned to face him. It was Karen Shields herself. She'd come in person. She held out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and showed him her credentials with calm finality. "This is now a federally documented medical installation," she said evenly. "Step off the property." Darrell faltered. "She's not even a veteran," he snapped, grasping at something. Anything. Karen didn't blink. She's the mother of one. That qualifies under Article 7, Section 2 of the VHA Residential Assistance Program. "And if you touch this ramp again, Tibien," she added, her voice flat and final, "you'll be violating federal disability access law. That's a Class C offense." Darrell opened his mouth again, but no words came, just the sound of his pride collapsing somewhere behind his eyes. Behind them, the contractors were already finishing the installation, welding the final brackets into place. The new ramp gleamed like a monument. And in that moment, it became clear this wasn't just about access anymore. This was about sending a message. Intimidation doesn't work here. Not on this porch. Not in this town. Justice didn't roar into Maple Creek with flashing lights or sirens. It arrived quietly, thoroughly, and with paperwork. After the ramp was installed, Nate kept his word. He compiled everything: the fake violation notice, photos of Darrell's truck with those knockoff decals, and most importantly, a video recording from his dash cam, capturing Darrell's second visit, threats and all. The footage was clear, time-stamped, and damning. He handed it to Karen from the VA, who forwarded it directly to the Department of Justice's Fraud and Abuse Division. Impersonating a public officer, fraudulent issuance of legal notices, harassing vulnerable adults under false pretenses. It didn't take long for the investigators to connect the dots. 3 weeks later, something new appeared on the street. Darrell's truck, the same silver pickup with those faded magnetic decals, sat unusually still in his driveway. But this time, the sticker slapped across the windshield was real. "Seized, pending federal investigation." Neighbors whispered. Some took photos. Others simply shook their heads and walked past. No one asked questions. No one needed to. Darrell hadn't been seen since the day the VA showed up, and while the man who once stalked the sidewalks with a clipboard was now just a footnote in HOA gossip, Virginia was thriving. Every morning, just after sunrise, she opened her screen door, stepped out carefully with her cherry red walker, and glided down her steel ramp like it was a red carpet. She waved to neighbors watering their lawns. She paused to chat with the mail carrier. She smiled more. "That ramp's nicer than the one at City Hall," one neighbor joked. "Government grade," Virginia replied with a wink. As for Nate, he didn't make speeches. He didn't boast. But he did something that spoke louder. He ran for a spot on the Maple Creek HOA board, and he won, unopposed. His first motion: require all future HOA notices to be officially documented, traceable, and confirmed with a digital seal. No more magnetic badges, no more clipboard cowboys. Because if Darrell had taught them anything, it was that real authority doesn't shout. It stands quietly behind the people who need it most. And now, thanks to a steel ramp, a loyal grandson, and a system that finally worked as it should, Virginia Cole had her dignity and her freedom back.